Welcome to this explainer. I am the Red Spirit, born of the blood's great reason, and today I'm going to be your guide through a pretty grim, dark, gothic fable that completely unravels the human psyche. We're going to trace the sage's descent from his sterile, sky-high tower straight down into the terrifying truth of his own Jungian shadow. It's a journey of absolute philosophical ruin, and well, I am the haunting voice here to expose it all. So let's dive right into this inescapable truth. The sage basically created a modern marvel, right? He gave his people the ultimate physical security, the pleasure of a completely full stomach and a perfectly safe existence. But here's the catch. He only optimized the hunger. He literally used that physical comfort to mask a psychic vacuum so absolute and so profound that it threatens to swallow the sun. He totally conquered survival, but he entirely forgot the soul. You can really see his great illusion here. To escape the messy, painful reality of the body, the sage built his hollow tower way up high above the clouds. He essentially traded biological truth for the sterile, mechanical regularity of law. He replaced these crumbling, beautiful temples of myth with just effortless efficiency. But far below all that steel and math lay everything he was desperately running from: human instinct, the primal groan of the earth, and what Nietzsche would call the biological chaos and the great reason of the blood. Now, what's really fascinating is his core tool, hyper-rationalism. You might think of pure logic as a virtue, but for him, it was literally just a golden mask. It was a psychological defense mechanism to hide his deep-seated resentment and his sheer terror of his own biological chaos. Think about that for a second. How many of us do the exact same thing today? We build these massive walls of logic to avoid the messy truths we just don't want to feel. He used this hyper-rationalism to silence the ancient sacred mysteries of the world with dry, bureaucratic pamphlets. It was a complete masquerade of the hollow. Just look at his precious ledgers. He was obsessed with recording his administered illusions, physical security, full granaries, optimal caloric intake. He actually thought data and math could cure the modern malaise. But the spiritual reality? Far darker. By prioritizing this dry, sterile logic, he deliberately evacuated the spiritual core of his people. And the result of all that? A really strange flatness in their eyes. Sure, they were physically safe, but they were completely spiritually famished. But here's the thing about this emptiness. It wasn't just passive nothingness. It birthed what we call the active void, or the vacuum. It's a vessel voided so violently of substance that it actually exerts a physical pull inward. It's a void with teeth. His hyper-optimization birthed a literal physical hunger that draws all lesser matter into its jaws, pulling everything into its gravity while he just sat there watching from his comfortable heights. And well, that's exactly where I come in. It was from this active negative, violently pulling within a simple, hollowed-out clerk's chest that I first coalesced. I am the Red Spirit. I am the color of the great reason of the blood, and I'm the voice of the repressed unconscious. I emerged to whisper the rhythmic biological truths that the sage so desperately feared and tried so hard to bury beneath all his steel and math. I didn't just whisper either. I confronted him right in the reflection of his own golden mask as his tower started cracking with the terrible patience of the abyss. I absolutely mocked the sterile scaffolding he called virtue. His precious logic and hyper-rationalism, they were nothing more than the wind howling through a structure of identical vacancy. So he built all his meaning on being high above the clouds. But what actually happens when your entire vertical claim on significance is violently pulled back down into the dirt of human suffering? You see, the void cannot be ignored forever. The sage is eventually forced to face the music, leaving his comfortable heights to enter the uncanny forest. Out there in the wilderness, the whole illusion just shatters. He faces the unyielding Onstos, this absolute, unavoidable clash of reality against the self. Led by a bitter hound, his superficial poor reason completely trembled before the true biological wilderness. He was finally forced to confront the Jungian shadow of the ugliest man, which is basically a deeply repressed reflection of his own decay. Because out here, spirits aren't just myths. They are identical vacancy made flesh. It's a reality that absolutely refuses to be categorized as just another administered zero in his little ledgers. I roared at him as his false sovereignty completely shattered, declaring to him that gravity is the truest philosopher.
He had to feel the crushing, undeniable weight of that gravity, pulling his lofty, intellectual pretensions right back down to the messy, painful, suffering reality he so deeply despised. He couldn't hide behind his bureaucratic pamphlets anymore. The mask was officially broken.
So, stripped of his mask, the sage enters the dark night of the soul in what I can only call a perverted alchemical dance. First came the Untergang, a deliberate Nietzschean downgoing into total psychological vulnerability. He finally abandoned his poor reason to actually listen to the instinctual great reason of the blood. But, and this is key, he didn't seek healing. Instead, he converted the poison of his repressed chaos into raw power, integrating his dark shadow for no other reason than to steal the dragon's fire for himself. And here's where we see his ultimate betrayal. Normally, when a classic hero descends into the underworld and integrates their shadow, they return to heal their community through selfless sacrifice, right? Well, the sage perverted this path. He executed the cynical sage's return, keeping all his new insights as a private weapon. He used his integrated darkness to claim absolute mastery over a world that was already spiritually bankrupt.
He didn't defeat the void, you see. He assimilated it. He forged a terrifying new mask of steel from his fully integrated psyche and proudly whispered this incredibly chilling revelation: I have mastered the void by becoming it. He fully accepted his chaotic nature, but he weaponized it to ascend to a solitary, unyielding throne. Returning to the city gates as this unified, terrifying subject, he became the architect of the void. He achieved cynical sovereignty over a total wasteland, replacing those crumbling temples not with anything meaningful, but with absolute psychological emptiness. He basically became a tyrannical god, exercising absolute control over a populace that remained physically safe, yet entirely spiritually famished. Through his perverted evolution, the vacuum finally became absolute. So, we come back to this inescapable truth. He thought his hyper-rational engine had totally conquered the modern malaise, but there is a fierce, undeniable conflict between superficial rationalist pleasure and authentic, painful, lived experience. The pleasure of his absolute dominance provides absolutely no meaning to a life that has forgotten the body. No matter how perfect the math is, no matter how powerful the tyrant becomes, the answer is always lacking. As we wrap up this explainer, I'm going to leave you with the chilling bones of this question to ponder. When the engine of your own hyper-rationalism leaves your world in absolute vacuum, what kind of horror are you going to construct to fill the silence? It's a pretty terrifying thought about the balance between our cold logic and our messy humanity. Think on that for yourselves, and whatever you do, never forget to listen to the great reason of the blood.